So it's about 2 weeks until the spring training starts for the MLB, and I can't be any more excited. I think there's a. I started talking about it last week with the qualifying offer, and I think that's still BS, and it's hurting a lot of free agents and stuff. So I think a lot of the schools are going to be interesting, or not schools. The teams will be interesting. There's going to be a lot of matchups to watch, and I'm just excited for the season. So I'm going to go do a breakdown of each division, talk about it, and then who I project to win, and maybe a little bit of storylines too. So I'm going to start off in the AL and just go straight down the list here as I see it. So first we got the AL East that has Toronto Blue Jays, Yankees, Baltimore Orioles, Tampa Bay Rays, and Boston. And I see a lot of potential in this because Boston just signed, or not just signed, but they signed him this offseason, David Price. So that could be a good addition to their team. They also got a Yoan Moncada and Pablo Sandoval, Hanley Ramirez, David Ortiz is last year, and all that stuff. So I think they're going to be at least top three in the division, not last like they were. I don't know about them winning it over Toronto and New York, but I still think they're going to do a lot of good here. And then moving on to Tampa Bay, they're always sneakily right around 500, at least the past couple of years. Before that, they were upper in the division, so I think they're going to hover at 3-4 spot, contend for a playoff spot, at least until late September, or mid-September, I should say. So Tampa Bay, as always, they're going to have Chris Archer, and they always have like 2 or 3 young pitchers that come up and they're like, oh, hey, these guys are studs kind of thing. They're all in the AL Cy Young, or not Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, and maybe Cy Young too, who knows. But Tampa Bay's just got a wealth of pitching. They added Corey Dickerson, so they have some hitting now with Longoria and a couple other pieces there. So I think they're kind of primed to be in the race for a long time this year or at least for a while this year. I'll just leave it at that. Next we got Baltimore. They re-signed Chris Davis and signed their closer as well. A couple other pitchers, just kind of kept it all in house. And I think they've been about 500 every year. And with Buck Showalter, you can never really count them out. So I think they may not get into the playoffs, but they're going to fight till the end, like the Rays, like I said. So that's going to be something to watch there. Then the New York Yankees, they added a couple pieces. Or they actually haven't. I say that because that's just normal, but they actually haven't added anyone. They literally spent $0 in the free agent market this year, and that is the most surprising thing I've ever heard. And I was like, no way when I first heard about it. But then I looked at their stuff, and they didn't. So I think New York, they got into the playoffs. They were a wild card last year, and I think they're going to be primed to do that again, if not being a division winner. And then same with Toronto too. And I think Yankees are kind of good. They got Starlin Castro at second base now. They need bigger production from Gregorius and Teixeira and Beltran, and maybe try to get Greg Bird in there too as well. But I think the Yankees are good for postseason once again. And then Toronto, I project to win the division again. They have Tulo, they have Josh Donaldson, they have I can't think of what his name is, Batista too. They have a bunch of really good talent on the offensive side and stuff like that. So I guess they're just gonna be really good, I think. And so they have Marco Estrada and a couple other good pitchers coming back. So I think they're set, and I think they're going to win the division again. Moving on to the Central, you got Kansas City, Minnesota, Cleveland, Detroit, and the White Sox. I'm just going to say Cleveland is going to be right around 300 again. Or not 300, 500 again. And so the White Sox, the bottom three are going to contend for maybe a wild card, but I don't really see them going really insanely deep into that, into the race, into like mid-September maybe. If one of them may get may keep it into September, keep it interesting into mid-September, but I doubt it. Two teams to watch here are the Royals, the defending World Series champions, and Minnesota. Minnesota's got a lot of really good young talent. They have Byron Buxton, Miguel Sano. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head either. But they have just a bunch of young talent that were like top prospects a couple years ago, and now they're in the big leagues, so that's good for them. And Kansas City, as always, is really good. They added a couple pieces. They did lose Cueto, which is not a bad thing, but they signed Ian Kennedy also, and they re-signed Alex Gordon, which is always good, and I think they're going to be good to go for another long season. And then, so moving on to the AL West, you got Oakland, who's not really going to do a whole bunch unless they get their offense figured out. Then there's Seattle, who's going to be the same thing. They were projected to do really good, and then kind of just flamed out. I predict the same thing, maybe. I don't know. And then you got the Angels, who have extremely upgraded with Andrelton Simmons at shortstop, and they still have Pujols, they still have Trout, Kurt Calhoun, and just a bunch of stuff. I think they're kind of primed to make a little bit of a run, maybe a playoff. They will get a playoff berth, but I don't know if it's going to be a wild card or not. So then you got Houston. The Astros were a big upstart last year. They got all the way to I think it was the NLC or ALCS. That's going to take me a while to remember that. And they didn't lose anyone. They're still working on adding a couple pieces. They're going to be set. And then Texas, they have Yu Darvish coming back, Prince Fielder, Shin-Soo Choo, a bunch of offensive pieces. I think those three teams, Texas, Houston, and the Angels, are primed to make a run next year. So that was going to be my interesting division for the AL, because you got at least the top three teams. Seattle could work their way in there too. Same with Oakland, would be more iffy if they just have to add a piece. They have the right pitching staff, but they need to add another piece there. So, moving on to the NL, we got the NL East. This is really going to be a two-horse race between the Mets and the Nationals. I'm just going to talk about Miami. Well, Miami could be in there too if they get Giancarlo Stanton all year and Jose Fernandez all year too. So, that's going to be interesting. Atlanta's not really, they're more in a rebuild, so is Philadelphia, so I'm not really going to touch on them. So, going with the Mets, they have the big top three of Syndergaard, Harvey, and Jacob deGrom. Plus they have a couple other, Bartolo Colon, depending on if they bring him out of the bullpen or not, and a couple other, Zach Wheeler, and I think two other young prospects that might be able to be in that discussion as top prospects and in the rotation. So I'm going to be interested to see what they do. I think with Cespedes, however you say it, re-signing, and then their trio of top pitching prospects, they're kind of set there. Washington's going to be interesting because they still have Strasburg, and they still have their top three, Gio Gonzalez, Strasburg, and can't think of their third one, the guy who threw 2 no-hitters last year. And then they still have the reigning MVP in Harper and Adam Roach. So they're not really set in the offense, and it'll be interesting to see because they traded Drew Storen. I think they're trying to run with Papelbon as their closer, but I don't think that's going to last. Their bullpen's kind of a worry, and so is their infield offensively. So I got the Mets in the East. Washington maybe getting a wild card, which I don't think is going to happen unless one of these central teams, which I'm talking about right now, it falls off. So you got St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and Chicago. The Cubs being the top three teams in the AL or NL. Well, actually, in the whole MLB last year, and they're also all in the same division. And then you got Milwaukee and Cincinnati. Milwaukee and Cincinnati are in the midst of rebuild, so they're not doing much. Brewers might be selling a lot of their pieces, as in their catcher, Ryan Braun, who is a right fielder, and then a couple other pieces. So they might be in a full sell mode, and same with Cincinnati. But St. Louis, they lost Jason Hayward to the Cubs, and I think they picked up a couple of the pieces. They still have their really top-end rotation. They still got Yachty, and they just have a lot of good pieces there. I don't think that they're going to win the division crown again, but they will get to the playoffs as one of the top three teams in the MLB again. Who I do think is going to win the division crown is the Chicago Cubs, and that's because they have a bunch of young pieces in Chris Bryant. Hayward's still fairly young. Jorge Soler, Schwarber, I don't even know, Javier Baez, Addison Russell, they're everywhere. Rizzo, they're literally everywhere on that team. And they got John Lester, and I think they picked up a number 2. They have Arrieta as well, and they picked up someone else. I can't remember who it is. Some lefty who pitched with Lester in Boston, so I think that's going to be good for them. They're going to have 3 solid pitchers to start the year off with, and then hopefully it'll work really well in the division games, especially against the Pirates and the Cubs, or the Cardinals and the Pirates, sorry. So, and speaking of the Pirates, I think Pittsburgh gets the other wild card, as well as St. Louis, with the Cubs winning the division, just because every year they've done it, they've won. So they got the kind of key to success there. They got McCutchen, they got Starling Marte, they got the pitching, the catching, they got everything. They're a really solid team, top down, and I don't really see them being a huge non-factor in this division. I think they're going to be a big player in the MLB, top 3 team in the MLB again. So moving on to the West, got Colorado, who didn't do anything, and San Diego, who was high expectations, and they're kind of not really going to be a factor. San Diego more of a factor than Colorado. The Padres might be able to fix or put it all together after the big spending spree from last year, but I doubt it. Who will be able to put it together after a big spending spree this year is the Dodgers. They got Zach Greinke, they got Shelby Miller, and they got some shortstop too. I don't remember who it was, but still, Arizona is going to be a little bit more of a contender for the West. I think only one team comes out of the West, and that's between the Dodgers, Giants, and Diamondbacks, and I think the Diamondbacks have more of a chance than any other team, than the Giants, to beat the Dodgers, because they have the pitching staff and the insanely good offense with Goldschmidt and their center fielder. I can't remember his name, but yeah, so they got AJ Pollock is his name, and they got just the offense and the pitching. So San Francisco, it's an even year. You can never count them out. They might win 84 like they did this year, and they might just regress a little bit. The only way that they can get back to the reason I mentioned the even years, because the last 3 even years they've won the World Series. The only way they can get back to the World Series is if they win the division, because there's no way they can get a wild card here. So that's going to be interesting here. And then the last one is the Dodgers. I do think that they'll win the MLB or the NL West again, just because they got Kershaw, they got the offense, they got the big payroll for these great offensive threats and pitching, and they have some pretty good defense. They got to figure Puig out, but this division is going to be a lot closer than it usually is or should be. I think the Giants will finish 3rd, probably 3 games out, and the Diamondbacks will finish probably 1 game out of the Dodgers at the end of the year. So that's my predictions for the MLB, and that's my primer. I think I'll do a little bit more. I'm going to do a whole spring training thing 2 weeks from now, so be on the lookout for that. And that's just my predictions for the MLB for the 2016 season.